Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode. Today we have a pediatric clinical pharmacist and a well-established researcher. Cheyenne, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheyenne Mattinia. I'm a clinical pharmacist in pediatric cardiology and heart transplant at the Hospital for Sick Children. I'm also a graduate student at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Toronto. I study conflict in pharmacy students and how it impacts their professional development.
Awesome. So let's start from the very beginning, where you were first inspired to pursue a career in pharmacy.
Mhm. So for me, where I was first inspired to do pharmacy, it was a bit of an interesting journey. So I started my undergrad degree at the University of Toronto. I was studying life sciences, and my specific majors were immunology and ecology. And we had the opportunity to do research projects. That's something I will always encourage students to do is to, if you have the opportunity to try research in different ways, absolutely take it. So I was doing my third year research project in immunology, and my project had to do with hormone manipulation in mice and mimicking their version of their menstrual cycle and how it impacted their immune cells. And part of it involved me injecting them with estrogen and progesterone equivalents. And I remember looking at the monographs. I didn't know what monographs were at the time. And I remember thinking, wouldn't it be cool to be a medication expert? Little did I know at the time that that was actually describing what I do now in my role as a clinical pharmacist. And so it's cool to kind of think back because back then I didn't really have much of an understanding of what pharmacy was. I had a classmate at the time who had gone into the PharmD program, and I was like, "Hey, like, what's that all about?" And that was my first exposure to just the existence really of the pharmacy program. It was through that experience that had really led me to start thinking about pharmacy and then also learning more about it. So when I was right before I started applying to pharmacy, that's when I learned about that pharmacists practice in so many settings, but especially in hospitals. And the pharmacists can do research and pharmacists can work in academia, all areas I'd had interest in. So that for sure was one of the most influential roles I'd ever had. And that research project was under a researcher called Dr. Michelle Anderson. She's absolutely lovely, incredible mentor. And so I can't thank her enough for that opportunity because it indirectly led me into pharmacy, which I am absolutely in love with today.
Oh, that's amazing. And throughout the pharmacy program, what experiences did you have which further nurtured your passion for pharmacy?
Mhm. So it's interesting because I had some outside, like external pharmacy, like outside of pharmacy experience that had led me to have more interest in pharmacy itself. So I really enjoyed the clinical aspects of pharmacy and education. That's what led me into my research. That's what leads me into a lot of teaching opportunities that I do and education. And so while I was in school, yes, I had the opportunity to do clinical rotations at Sunnybrook Hospital. That exposed me to clinical pharmacy. The pharmacists there are absolutely incredible. And that really formed my interest in the clinical piece. And then on the other side of it, I worked as a residence don throughout for the last year of my undergrad and then throughout my PharmD. And a residence don is essentially a live-in support for undergraduate students, mainly first and second year students. And you're heavily involved in doing para counseling with them, programming, safety. It's a really, really intense and involved role in student support. And while at the same time I was going through pharmacy school, I was working as a residence don. I knew I wanted to do clinical work, but I remember thinking at the time when I was in third year, and that's when you kind of have to, the third 3 year of the 4 year PharmD program. That was around the time when I remember thinking that I have to kind of put my fork in the sand. I don't know what the expression is, but I basically had to kind of pick a direction of what I wanted to go into. And I remember thinking, like, yes, for sure, I want to do hospital pharmacy, but I really love the work I do as a residence don. I absolutely love the student life aspect of this job, but I guess I have to say goodbye to it. And it wasn't until I spoke to a couple different mentors, um, while I was considering doing a residency that I learned that actually I can incorporate those things together. And so while this isn't directly related to your question, I very confidently right now say that I think pharmacy is the best healthcare profession to get into, not only for like the incredible impact we can have on patients, but I really think pharmacy is such a great field for being able to bring yourself to the profession, whichever field you're in. For me, it's in hospital pharmacy and also hopefully more and more so in research and academia. But pharmacy is just an absolutely fantastic field for that. And so both my clinical experiences during school and also being a resident on were huge influences on what led me to the path I'm on today.
That's amazing. And how do you envision your research on like conflict and communication? How do you think that influences like future training and education for pharmacy students?
So I'll give it a brief blurb about my research. So I study, as I'd said, the conflict in pharmacy students. I specifically look at um, pharmacy students while they're in their education and see what conflict experiences they have. So that's in the classroom, in clinical practice, and how that influences their professional development, how it impacts them. And the reason why this is important is because when conflict is taught in many different settings, right? When it's taught to physicians and nurses, it improves staff satisfaction, it decreases burnout, and improves patient safety. But there's no research right now for pharmacy students at all. So essentially, we don't know how we're training and impacting the future of our profession. And so my research is at this time with my master's is identifying what's happening right now, is getting kind of a scope of what's happening. And in the students' words, how are these experiences impacting them? There's a few ways that I want this research, that I hope this research will impact education to, my goal really is always to make education more accessible and to improve the education of our students. And I hope that this research helps students in education in two ways. One, of course, is with the formal curriculum. So I hope that we can incorporate more and more formal conflict curriculum in our education. And conflict to me isn't a negative thing. It's actually an important communication tool. Because if you can engage in disagreement in a healthy way, in a way that acknowledges differences, it helps open up your mind, and that can help you better communicate and also engage with other people, with your patients. There's so much research on the benefit of that. And so I can incorporate more curriculum that reframes conflict as an essential communication tool, and also prepare students for what they will encounter and what they are encountering, right? One of the things that's coming from my research is I think that we don't realize how often these types of positive but also negative conflict situations students find themselves in. And what's really important is we're training advocates, right? We're training people who are going to contribute to patient care. And we want them to be able to do that in settings, regardless of what they're recommending for the patients is in agreement with the rest of the room or not. We want students to be able to have confidence, to be able to apply critical thinking, and to speak up for what's right for our patients. And conflict situations are a fantastic place to learn how to do that. So I want us to be able to leverage that more. The other way I want this to influence education for students is also not only with students specifically, but also to provide support and resources and development for our current preceptors and faculty. While the reason why I chose studying students in the first place was because I think it's just a longer term, a much bigger impact. If we can get students as they're in school, I'll have a bigger reach with this material. But that doesn't mean that our current preceptors or current faculty don't also need that support as well too. So I hope that I can use my research to do that as well. And it's funny because I used to think when I first started this thesis with Zubin and Jamie, I had first thought that my outcome of this research would be just formal curriculum work, like whether it be a course or workshops, something more officially kind of tangible. And what I'm learning is as I'm going through this research, I have a lot of conversations with students and colleagues, one-on-one in small groups, about my research, about my findings, about what I want to recommend from it. And I'm finding that I'm getting a lot more impact with these one-on-one individual conversations. And these conversations often center around really important conflict principles in my mind, which are empathy and recognizing power imbalances. And so I'm finding it really interesting because I think by having these one-on-one conversations, by being able to teach people or at least show them that when we approach conflict with a curiosity, with a bit of open-mindedness, with a sense of wanting to learn rather than defend, it really can impact, again, our communication, and that directly impacts our patients and ourselves. So as I'm like right now in the thesis writing part of my research, I am brainstorming more and more ways that I can involve um, conflict education, conflict dialogue practices formally. I was able to do that when I taught a course to U of T PharmD students earlier this semester, but I'm still in the brainstorming phases of that. But long and short, I want this conflict research to improve the experiences both for students and for current practicing pharmacists.
That's incredible. I would also like to attest to that, that basically mastering conflict resolution is particularly important in an interdisciplinary setting like a hospital. So I really applaud your efforts on this subject.
Thank you.
Now, in terms of mentorship and like having role models throughout your journey, um, I was wondering like if you have any specific role models and how do you think their mentorship style influenced your approach to teaching and mentoring pharmacy students?
I'll say mentorship is such a gift, and it's such an essential experience to have when you're in areas that you haven't worked in or learned in before, which is most of us when we're in school, right? And so I'm really grateful to say I've had a number of really impactful mentors throughout my journey. I won't be able to name them all, but there's a few, and I have like little kind of they know this, so they have like little pearls that um they've done to impact me. So one of them is when Dr. Winnie Sito. She's our clinical manager at Sick Kids. She wears many hats. She's currently my manager right now, but she was my first pharmacy research experience back when I was a pharmacy student. So I've been working with her since I was a pharmacy student. So now it's probably been, I want to say like maybe 7 years. And she has been incredible in terms of challenge and support. So wanting to push me out of my comfort zone and also making sure I had the supports I need to do that. She did that for me as a student, has continued to do that for me now as a manager. And she also then, by doing that when I was a student, taught me what to look for in an experience when I went and I was shopping around for a residency program I wanted to attend. So after I finished my PharmD, I successfully matched Sick Kids and did my residency there. And so learning through Winnie and having her as an incredible mentor then taught me what to look for. And then so I found that excellent balance of challenge and support with the Sick Kids residency program. And that then introduced me to my next very impactful mentor, which is Dr. Alicia Koo. She's our education coordinator at Sick Kids in the pharmacy department. She also wears many hats, and she was my residency coordinator during my residency, and since then has also been a long-term role model even to this day. And so she has been not only fundamental clinically in teaching me and helping me develop my confidence as a clinician, which is to me, I feel like almost more important or just as important as developing your clinical skills right when you start practice. She really helped me do that. And also she was so encouraging to me and helped me find opportunities with education. So when I first started my residency program, like she does a lot of guided teaching. And she had asked me like, what do you want to do? Like, what things are you hoping to take from residency? And one of the things I said was, I really want to become an educator as well. And she introduced me to many different teaching opportunities, but she gave me an opportunity which was one of I would say the first one that kind of started this current tangent to where I am today in terms of speaking with students, in terms of even my own public Instagram. She had allowed me and another colleague to an opportunity to teach U of D PharmD students, first year students, about hospital pharmacy. I think that was like 3 weeks into my residency. So this is like September of 2019. And it was just like it was like the spark that had started me on this journey with students. And to this day, she provides me a lot of guidance and teaches me a lot of fundamentals for how I teach students for their thought process, presentations, clinical work. And I couldn't be more grateful for her. And then, of course, to wrap it up for my my mentors, of course, I have to mention Dr. Zubin Austin and Jamie Keller, who are both my co-supervisors for my master's thesis. Um, these two also have had such phenomenal impact on me since I was a pharmacy student as well. Both of them taught me during pharmacy school at different points. And I remember being mesmerized not only at their ability to teach and deliver material, because they're very engaging speakers in different ways, but they also had this passion behind them on for the areas that they were studying and also for training the next generation of pharmacists. And so it's been so I was going to say it's been so cool now to get to work with them so closely because I'm taking this research, which is very personal to me and very close to my heart, and being able to share this with them and have their mentorship. And they both do, again, in different ways, which is a great example for me to see different ways of doing it. They both have different ways of being able to encourage me and also challenge me. They're not themselves studying conflict and pharmacy students. That's my area. Yet they are still able to take their expertise, take their experiences, and help. It's these subtle experiences that I still can't quite articulate, but they do such a fantastic job of making me feel encouraged, even in times where it's not as clear to me for how to encourage myself. And those are lessons that I now take and develop and pass on to my current students and learners. And so I'm both Jamie and Zubin and all of my mentors I'm just so grateful for because they've all continued to have such a huge impact on my career journey.
That's amazing. And I do confirm that role models are really crucial in like showcasing you different areas of the clinical practice you're interested in, which eventually helps you in like carving out your own path and like eventually guiding you towards what you would like to become in the future.
Mhm.
Now, in terms of like pediatric specialty, I was wondering if there are some unique challenges you encountered in your role as a clinical pharmacist, and how did you address them?
So I would say this is really interesting because this question actually brings me back to when I was preparing for my sick kids residency interview. One of my good friends from pharmacy school was we were sitting in my condo. They were going through questions with me, and we were preparing for the sick kids interview. And I remember them asking me at the time, "How are you going to deal with patient death?" And I was like, "Oh man, that's a really good question. How would I navigate that if it happens? Because it does, right? We it's a reality of life, and it's something that we all at some point will encounter. And of course, it also happens at the hospital. And it's funny. The reason why I bring that up is because the answer I gave at that time for how I would navigate that, because it's something I anticipated encountering as a resident, I did end up encountering as a resident. The answer I gave at that time, however many years ago, is so relevant today to how I encounter it. I wouldn't say death is like necessarily just unique at a pediatric site. Like death happens in all areas of healthcare. It is it can be a bit deeper because it's children, right? And so people we see as more vulnerable, although once again, people in all areas of healthcare there can be vulnerable too, but it's dealing with the death of a child is not something that I had encountered before working in pediatrics. And um, it's interesting because working with pediatric patients has given me a deeper and a different relationship with death and a deeper appreciation for life. It sounds really cheesy. I recognize that, but um it gave me even a different perspective on aging itself. So um I think society teaches us that age, like depending on who you talk to, but we don't want to age or you want to stay younger for longer, whichever. And there was this long term, to not give personal details of them, but this patient who we had known for a very long time developed a very deep relationship, and they had died when they were quite young. And I remember that death had hit me really, really hard. Me and many members of our team. And I remember thinking, I'm sitting here worried about turning 30, and this patient didn't make it, let's say, to their fourth or fifth birthday. And it really taught me to value, like, that aging is a privilege and that it's beautiful. And that changed my perspective on life. That was one of the, I would say, coping strategies that I'd initially kind of thought when I was a student and preparing for my residency interview, and something that has now helped me with that challenge, that perspective going forward. And the other thing about it too is that, death is not it this is where another area that one of my other mentors helped me. It's different every time it happens. You have different relationships with not only the patients, but the circles of care, the families, the caregivers. Um, Sometimes they're a more complex patient, for a shorter time. Sometimes you develop a much longer term relationship with them. It What I have learned in preparing, what I've learned from my mentors and for myself, is that each time that it happens will be different. So just because I handled something one way the last time doesn't mean that will happen this time. It will feel the same. And to allow myself space for how I feel at that time. That was what a number of my mentors during my sick kids residency training had taught me. And it is such a crucial skill in healthcare because, I'm talking about death right now, but it's not only death that weighs heavily on us and our souls and our emotions, right? We're seeing people in vulnerable positions. Sometimes we're seeing people suffering daily, and we're there to try to help them. And giving ourselves space to feel our feelings, for lack of a better way to say it, helps us just even acknowledge and process what we're going through in the first place. And it sounds, I feel like if I told myself this like 5 years ago, I'd be like, that sounds so fluffy to say. Give yourself space to feel what you're feeling, and when you can, try to label it or identify it. I'm like, how could that be helpful? But after going through COVID, where sometimes you're just, pushing through difficulties, or you feel like you don't have time to sit and label them, because if you do, it's just gonna, you know, cause a cascade of emotions and such. I really find that giving myself space really help to feel my feelings really helps in the processing of this, because long term it can cause burnout, right? It happens in many different healthcare settings, many different healthcare professions. And so while, again, death and discomfort and difficulty is not unique to pediatrics, it is something that is encountered. And so to have your own way, at least initially, to try to engage with it is important. But it doesn't have to be a perfect way. And I would say, I think it's something that deters a lot of people from pursuing pediatrics. But I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to help patients and families at different points in their life and for whatever their life is going to look like, right? It's something now every day I feel very grateful that I have the privilege to provide care to or pediatric patients as part of our pediatric cardiology team. It's such a beautiful gift. And so I do hope that people take the opportunity to try pediatrics at some point in their career journey because it's such a beautiful area of practice.
That's definitely an insightful reflection. And as a follow-up question, I was wondering what strategies do you follow in helping the patient's family in navigating such emotionally challenging times?
Mhm. So the first is that we have many different roles and structures at Sick Kids that help provide emotional support to families. Social work will be one of my top favorite professions other than pharmacy, obviously. We have such fantastic social workers and their ability to help families and caregivers navigate the space, not only the resources of the system and how to navigate it, but also personally and emotionally. It's so, so important. And in just when I've seen the work that they've done with families and they continue to do, it's so absolutely essential. On the other side, we have something in pediatrics called child life specialists, another essential role. And their job is designed around helping children understand their experience, what their medicalized experience, what's going on. Because, for example, how how would you explain to a 3-year-old and help them understand that they're in heart failure or that they've been diagnosed with leukemia? Or that they need to have this blood work done, these pokes or these needles, because we need to know if the blood thinner we're giving them for their clot is working. All of these different supports. And so those are examples of more formal things we have that are really essential to pediatrics. Um, and also, of course, the environment of the hospital. I talk about this all the time to people. I bring it up quite often. I think that adult hospitals could take a note from pediatric sites because, while we have this focus on creating the environment, not to hide the fact that like difficulties exist, but to find child-friendly and supportive ways to navigate it. Um, it in turn makes the environment, I feel, supportive and even more supportive to the staff that work there. Because how we're then communicating things to patients then directly impacts me as well and other people on our teams. So I think adult hospitals could take a page from peds hospitals in that sense. And in terms of my role as a pharmacist, so what do I do in terms of navigating or helping to support families, caregivers, patients during these times, right? It all always comes down to, I teach this to my learners, of course. What is our role as a pharmacist? We are the medication experts. Okay. The ins and outs of the medications, the therapy that works the best, that's safest, teaching the education, support, making sure it is patient-centered care and it is tailored and doable for each patient is our role. And so then how do we take these principles of emotional regulation, of communication, of curiosity, and how do we incorporate that into when we're having conversations with families, either whether it be formal teaching, we're having a an interdisciplinary meeting on goals for our patients and decisions for next steps. And I find that a lot of my own work in conflict and in emotional resilience and communication really helps me in these settings because when you're able to approach because a lot of sometimes disagreements can come up, right, in terms of goals of care, in terms of understandings, in terms of what things want to be done, whatever it may be. And I find by like not to again plug my conflict research, but by approaching situations with curiosity, whether it be with families and caregivers, with team members, with the patients in front of us, it helps me to be more open-minded to their own perspectives. And that in and of itself, it's not tangible, or you can't, put your finger on it, but it completely changes the environment when I'm talking to a parent, when I'm talking to a 15-year-old that's newly been diagnosed with heart failure and is now going down the line in terms of procedures and therapies that they need, a total life change within a month. Or team members where we're having differences of opinion of what the next step should be for a patient. Um, right? We're all there, regardless of who it is, to provide better care for the patient. And this approach of curiosity is such a game changer for changing the environment of a conversation. And that helps me to, when you ask specifically about with families and navigating that for them, it is a team, it is a group effort, right? All of us team members are aware and cognizant of that this could be a new experience for the families and the patients, and to have that sensitivity, and also creating space when we're going to teach, when we're going to have conversations, when we're having discussions, that approach with curiosity, it really is a game changer. And I think from what families have come back and told me, really makes them feel seen and heard. And at the end of the day, that's what most people want when a conflict comes up, right? You can have disagreements, but people in general want to be seen and heard and understood. And so if how you communicate, I was teaching this to the first year PharmD students in our social behavioral health course. If there are ways in your communication that you can say the exact same sentence, but if there's body language, if there's tone, even if there is slight word changes that you can do to make them feel seen, heard, and understood, it will go miles for you to be able to help establish a relationship with them so that you can provide better care.
Amazing. So this brings us like to the um last stage of the questions. So basically about your Instagram profile. I'm actually really interested in learning about the thought process which led you to share your professional journey on Instagram.
Oh, thank you. So I have a public Instagram page called Ask a Pharmacy Resident. I post educational, or I wouldn't say lifestyle content, but little updates from my journey as a pharmacist and as a grad student on there. I'd started that account back in, I want to say May or June of 2020. And the reason why I had started it was because I had mentioned earlier that at the beginning of residency, one of my mentors had started introducing me to more education opportunities, and that really took off. I had then, from that point, been asked back to do a lot of talks and events from student groups, which I was very flattered about. So I did a number of talks all that way from September all the way until March. And we all know what happened in March of 2020. And what ended up happening was obviously things were shut down. And that meant essentially a complete pause on all student uh, engagements, clubs, activities, etc. And while at first it was great because I was like, okay, now I can completely focus on my residency, which is a lot of work. I felt this like gap because I was like, now I'm not getting that like engagement with students anymore. I'm not getting that formally. And at the time I was trying to then do other things. It was LinkedIn was kind of in baby steps of what it is today in terms of the outreach and advocacy discussions that would happen on there. And I was trying to, maybe make infographics, and I was trying that out. And I was like, I think I'd seen a couple different creators using Instagram, and I was like, I wonder if I can just take what I would teach or talk about and just start putting it on Instagram. And so it initially started and still is to this day as like a creative playground for me in being able to share content with students. I had started out at the beginning. I've had so many different phases of it. And that's why it's not a set in stone format for me. To me, it is a way for me to engage with current students. And I take that as a privilege, and I keep it open to be flexible in that, both for them and for me. So when I'd first started out with my Ask a Pharmacy Resident Instagram, I had done more like formal posts on little infographics. I think I'd done some on like how to apply to residency, how to remember which antibiotics covered MRSA or Pseudomonas, And then I started to go into more like clinical topics. So I started talking about like how to treat community-acquired pneumonia or how to start working up patients. And that had led me to create more teaching materials that I actually use now with my students. I've made patient workup templates or how to deliver presentations, more content in that aspect. There's a period of time I started to try doing reels, in turn like short form videos. And so regardless of the content type that I stuck with, it in terms of just skills for social media and how to communicate in different ways, it was really helpful and it is really helpful for learning that. Now more so because my thesis is like, taking up a good amount of time, which I love. I now, for the most part, will post. I use stories a lot right now too, in terms of sharing content, mostly around student support, but also specifically around conflict, around emotions, around power imbalances, things that are related to my research and thesis, and also to engage with different student groups. And I always considered having a platform with students a privilege because it's a space that allows me a direct link or a network in. And it's honestly been a fantastic space because before I was limited to engaging with U of T students, because that's my school. And it's actually through the Ask a Pharmacy resident Instagram account that I started engaging a lot more with Waterloo students. And now, since the U Ottawa program has been created also with U Ottawa students. And now, in the past 2 years, I've now even had the privilege to engage with pre-pharmacy groups and clubs. So undergraduate students at different universities that are interested in pursuing pharmacy. And it's been such a privilege because not only is it giving me again an opportunity to learn and try different ways of communicating with students, of creating my material into like, well, educational tidbit that can be taken away. That communication learning piece has been really great. It's also allowed me to, again, engage with students and see what's important to them. What are they talking about? What are they doing right now? What things are coming up? And that itself, like the principle of that, is so crucial. This is kind of like a little side note. I know this is the last question, but I personally believe I didn't get to go into my power imbalances tangent for conflict. I'll save that for another time. But when you are in service of a group, whether it be your patients, whether it be your students, chasing different perspectives and chasing a deeper understanding is crucial, especially when it's a group that you have power over, right? So if we are talking about our patients, right? Technically, we have power over them in some aspects in terms of they're coming to us as healthcare experts. They're coming to us. They might not have a background in their care, and they're trusting us with things. So to say it all in summary, because I could go on tangents forever, the Instagram has been an absolutely fantastic platform, not only for myself in terms of being able to get my research out there, in terms of being able to also develop the skills for social media, how to engage, how to use different platforms, also to improve my communication, right? Like how do you share material in short form, digestible content? The other side that's really important to always acknowledge, especially with social media, is the privilege of the platform that I have with students and being able to engage with them, share material, also being able to learn what's important to students. That is an incredibly important perspective when you are someone that's in power and you're in service of a group, which I see myself as someone that's in service of students, as long as they will keep me in that role. And so it's my responsibility to be able to know what's going on and to be able to communicate and understand what's important to students. And I see it as, I keep saying it, but I see it as a huge privilege to be able to engage with students responsibly that way.
Awesome. Any last piece of advice for pharmacy students who are still not sure what specialty they're interested in, like whether it's hospital pharmacy or just community or even industrial?
You don't have to have it figured out. That sounds probably not very comforting to students who are trying to have it figured out. Um, you won't know what specialty you want to go into until you try things. And so try to narrow it down, try to find areas, but do not stress that you haven't figured out your area you're always going to be in. If anything, I think it's more normal and realistic that you're going to be learning and growing throughout your time. I've worked in 5 or 6 different clinical practice areas intentionally to, shop around and try and grow my experiences, and that is completely okay. The other advice I would say is really important is to get in the process of networking and trying to find a mentor. I'll say that the mentors I spoke about earlier, those are mentors I actually found much later in my pharmacy journey. It felt like forever until I'd found them, but the pursuit of that finding a mentor is really important. It might feel like for a period of time you don't find someone who you feel like sees you or understands you or gets you, and that's okay. Eventually, you will find people who see and appreciate different aspects of you. They might not see you as a whole, but they see particular things about you, and they can offer different experiences and share their experience. And being able to find that is really helpful when, just as you said, students are trying to figure out what to do next and what's available. And leaning on our seniors in the pharmacy profession is an excellent way to do that.
Amazing. It's been a pleasure learning about your experience, your different insights, and basically getting to know more about your professional journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.